Oh, good, Lukey, because people have asked me a little more to describe perhaps the overall condition of people over the earth. And could there be something which you could just say, which is the overall condition of the earth, which is to do with the condition? I'd say that it's cystic fibrosis, and most may not have really heard much about that. They could have heard that, you have stiff muscles, or your joints and your body aches a bit, and this sort of thing. But most won't know that that's a jaundiced condition.
Wow. Makes sense.
Okay. And all conditions start with a bit of a jaundiced condition of cystic fibrosis. And those that are born in the East, nearly 100% are born with jaundiced condition, and 50% of those born in the West here also, and it sort of clears up for them somewhat over the first 4 weeks or so. But a baby's skin, where anybody could have tasted or licked that, parents could have said that the skin of the baby tasted a little salty. It's usual it wouldn't, but that if the skin tastes a little salty, it's evidence of sort of like blocked ducts and things not open and plugged. And basically, where you could say that an epigenetic condition is it can have less than allowed a protein, amino acid, to be present that lets salt be not excreted but held onto. And when you could imagine that most of our condition is sort of something which could have been in an ocean environment where our cells are, and all the organelles in our cells are floating in a sodium sea, and that sodium sea is different from anything from the land because it's only potassium on the land, but sodium more in the sea. And so our blood is salty. It's got sodium chloride, and it has massive amounts of calcium. And these two elements, like salt water, seawater, up to a certain point, you could use ocean seawater to fertilise the land. 10% of that salt seawater and 90% of it fresh, and then that could be dispersed over land and things. But basically, things which is a salt, which is amphoteric, meaning it's straight with nature. It has a property of permittivity, and amphoterics and amphiphilics. Permittivity is the ability to take on a charge and release that, pass it on. And amphoterics is the capacity to be able to be a south or a north, depending on what's needed. And amphiphilics is the ability to be able to mix oil and water together. And salt has to have properties which assist to cause it to be combined, and if it's enzymatically active, it's very useful. Otherwise, we'd perish without any salt, but the salt that comes from all inland is enzyme resistant and doesn't really do the job as well as what an ocean wind evaporated salt does, because that can be life quality transmutated. And so the industry shows you that you can only have so much of that rock salt, and it's annoying to everybody. You have to put on a label how much of that salt that's got in there, because you can only have so much of that salt, that rock salt. You can't imagine anybody just grinding up rocks and giving it to their baby. And salt, which comes from the ocean, is living, versus from rocks it's not. Anyway, most have a amino acid deficiency that they could have been born with, epigenetic somewhat, and it can have less than allowed them to have proper capacity to cause sodium to be kept, and always would be excreted, and so that because it can have come low to be low, but excreted in excess. And can imagine fluids where salt is excreted in excess, it becomes thickened, And because calcium is 10,000 to 1 outside the cell than it's on the inside, and the same with sodium. Sodium is very high on the outside, and potassium is on the inside of the cell. And calcium is 10,000 to 1 on the outside than inside. So you can see that it's going to push calcium uphill to get it outside the cell. And when people are cortisoled, or they are in limited mind function, or they have been, always cortisol would have been released, and all these stress hormones, and that causes the body to start to dry up, like a dry mouth. So pancreas, where someone really doesn't have the sweetness of life, they cannot really have proper pancreatic function. So, when you're practicing a whole brain functioning, you're more in the sweetness of life, and these are the things which cause your pancreas to function. And 26 grams more or protein is produced in your intestine every day, and it's producing all the essential fatty acids and everything that you need, that somebody could take care of what this is. But when we're born, like I said, in the East, vast majority of people are born shorter than 50% here, and it's really not so rare that all sorts of hepatomegaly types of conditions affecting the liver, and hyperbilirubinemia, which is excessive bilirubin. All of these things are fairly abnormal, but rife today. And hepatic enzyme is not uncommon, showing up that some liver challenges existed where someone's only maybe 6 weeks old. It's sure difficult to have a body where a baby isn't able to process sodium proper and keep it, but excrete it. And it thickens up the mucus, and so it's not thin, and the baby's pancreas can't secrete proper substance through itself to neutralise the churn and acid from the stomach. An infant in such a state, or as an adult also, growing up more, a jaundiced condition was, and the ability to really rid the body of bilirubin, clearing it away from the bloodstream, wasn't really working. You could see that getting deposited in the skin, and thickening of fluids always is behind that, the causing of stone in the pancreas and kidney. And a child really can have a high turnover rate of red blood corpuscle, which ordinarily would be broken down and be complete within 120 days or so, but could be really being replaced quite regularly. And as the liver and the pancreas can't empty itself because the fluids are thickened because calcium is in excess. So when cortisol is raised because someone is in limited mind function and they've only been conditioned to have a don't work, can't, should, try, but must only as a preferred mode of sorting information, mostly what they only ever processing information from polarization and meta-responding, going over stuff but not being able to exit. And these things cause someone quite stress itself and raises calcium always. And so calcium is often in excess, and when it is, and it's excreted, it's on the outside, it also really causes the fluids of the body to become more sticky and tacky and thickened, and for them not to have their fluid thinness like it's supposed to, like when you have life hydrate, it unsticks the platelets of the blood. And it's designed to do this. So kidneys and lungs are often impacted really where dryness is, and chronic possible lung cleansing can have not really occurred like it should. N-acetylneurominic acid is a primary surfactant that we should have, which is in life hydrate, or vitamin L, which is really what makes your every other nutrient. It causes the waters to be thinned. And so we're going to be talking just a little bit about this today, because it's the primary condition that's sort of underneath everything. And cystic fibrosis is really not properly understood at the moment. And so because of it, most don't know that an altered carbon dioxide level of a cell, and also an altered nitrous oxide as well, is going to cause the body not to really be able to have substance to vasodilate and open up these very, very small tubes, which cause blood to be filtered through the kidneys and other places. And upstream of all these organs, like we're talking about, is the pancreas. I mean, the pancreas has to pass its substance on so that smooth muscles that surround blood vessel and things like that can be relaxed and dilated, meaning opened up, so that the juices can pass through the pancreas to be able to cause smaller particulate of food you've eaten, so that it's turned into an osmolytic element that can be absorbed across the membrane. Otherwise, someone could have conditions really which is because, like, even if considered blood type incompatibilities, like ABO incompatibilities, one sort of should look into these things. But dyspnea and anorexia and sort of painful coughedness and anxiety and bulky, greasy stools and sweat, which you could obviously see salt, that's been excreted from the body. And so there's an often condition of constipatedness and diarrhea going on, bouts of, and all risk sort of autistic types of Asperger's symptoms and condition. And it was for me just to see that most of all these conditions really had a condition more in the gut as well, that you could heal and help heal more of the behavioural conditions as well. But it's all a risk to conditions where autism is, and degrees of autism, including like Asperger's, which is the conditions where, unless these things we're just talking about can be checked, it's a frequent bulky, greasy, sort of smelling type of stool, often sort of diarrhea-ish, and mucoid type of foul smelling. Most of these kids are born already in amniotic fluid, which has meconium ileus in it, which is the fecal matter from the baby, which is if you eat live food during the pregnancy, and we don't really have any of that meconium whatsoever in the fluid. But it's typical that most born babies can be born, and certain it is, you can see meconium already, the baby's being taking poops and having to poop more into the mother and the amniotic fluid. And overgrowth and abdominal pain and watery diarrhea types of stools and this sort of thing, and overgrowth of bacteria goes on in the intestine. And mothers can often not keep the plug until the uterus is ripe, which is just before birth usually, but not where stress is. The plug can be lost early and the uterus not ripe. Most people don't know, and a lot of people are just being acted upon. But if you were a detective and you saw what was, you looked into things, you could see a defective protein, amino acid, starting at the beginning of our talk, which is in short supply, and it really results coming from a genetic and epigenetic type of factor, which is really not favourable to sodium, proper transport we're talking about, and so it's excreted more than it should be, and it causes fluids to be more thickened as a result on the membranes and stuff, and coagulated, and it causes fluids to not flow properly through the intestine. And many mothers can have been given nephrotoxic, meaning kidney types of toxic types of antibiotic, and wrongfully administered can all of those cause various kidney types of conditions and failure, and chloride levels cannot be present proper. Amino acids can be broken and not available as much. And then the chloride molecule has to be larger, of course, but really low if it's between 30 and 60 micromoles per litre. It's a transmembrane conductance receptor where a defective gene is, and so salt isn't being kept in the body, but it's being excreted, and it causes the fluids to be more sticky, and gastrointestinal reflux in the beginning when babies are, causing this contents of the stomach to have been sometimes passed up through into the nose when the child was laying down, and bursting from the esophageal sphincter and coming up into the nose and burning everything. And so these kids are not easy wanting to be put down after that. But mucus incipiation and dysmotility of the distal passageways of our body could have really become closed down and not open like it's supposed to be. And especially small moments where mouth breathing is going on. And do you know if you're mouth breathing any point in the night? Because you shouldn't be. You should be nose breathing. Of course, gastroesophageal refluxive types of conditions and the small bowel overgrowth, the bacteria like we're talking about, is often present, and puffiness really is around the eyes. But the skin often, if you lick the skin, you can see it to taste salty, and often as they're phlegmy and more polypy types of conditions are going on, and smooth muscle contraction isn't dilating. And so trypsin and chymotrypsin, you can look to see what's happening where the stool is, to see what enzymes are existed or not, and if they're present or not, the pancreas. But if stone is in the pancreas, which is typical because of high phosphate diet and high methionine diet and dead food, not live food, and eating a lot of consumed molecules of death, which is N-acetyl, N-glyconeuminic acid, and other types of surfactant, which is found in insects and fish and bird and pigs, which is not a surfactant that you and I have any capacity DNA to be able to break down. And so these things just act like prion and interfere and cause neoplastic condition, which really is a tissue beyond the economy, which should really be there. And then so coughing and wheezing can all be noticed a bit earlier on. And mutations in the DNA receptor gene can be shown typical, whereas the 1p36 gene can often be knocked out and shows sort of a morbidity and not a capacity really to be able to think straight per se. Also, there's the VMAT gene, which is the God gene. These two genes really are involved more in neurotransmissions and this sort of thing, but other things as well. And really not functional. Can't sort of cause somebody to really have transpersonal consciousness much, and sort of only be looking at people and looking at the world in a different way than what we ordinarily would be. So micro-niches where things exist like that can be in a family and can be within the body, of course, and it can be situationally specific where things like that come out because of stress more, but it might not really be elevated unless you really could see an elevation of sweat chloride level, that you really do have a state of cystic fibrosis, because typical then someone's sweat would be relatively free of salt primarily. And when anemia is really rife, which it is, where these children are with jaundiced skin, it's typical that anemia is really rife where there is in the colour of the stool also, and it really decreases the comfort where eating is. And straturia really is an impaired osmolytic assimilation and from a lack of proper digestion. As we've been talking about, fat malabsorption and really not proper essential fatty acid synthesis, then is really not working like it should in a chain of body. Very important, these essential fatty acids. And it's really a cause then upstream that we're talking about from the pancreas not passing on proper goodness because fluids are sticky and not flowing through itself like it should. And after that, then how does the brunner gland function, which is supposed to have very extreme north negative element enzymes to help heal your body? It doesn't really get passed on nutrients like it should. And so if I was thinking when somebody asked me, well, what's the major condition? I'm thinking really, I know sodium is really, really not known how bad that is, meaning that how needed it is, and how important it is for anemia and these sorts of things, and what to do to be able to help correct eating so what's consumed is being neutralized so that it gives it pancreas a chance to function properly. Otherwise, you've got endothelial and also epithelial growth factor, which is produced and should be but wouldn't be. So then you've got the lining and the passageways of our cells not really having proper conditioning, and not so noticed, of course, but children could be suffering from this cystic fibrosis, and generally not really be seen more, and then start to be some symptoms that people could go, oh, well, this is cystic fibrosis, maybe after some few years. So micromoles per litre of sweat test could really show whether any challenge exists such. But it really is a high cortisol stress during pregnancy, which can have exacerbated the condition, more in utero. And so I think that you're getting a bit of a picture. And maybe, might I say just something a tiny bit about cortisol and the thyroid, and we'll just see how we go. But if you're thinking about children, parenting, kids, and caregivers, could be noted that if somebody is nose breathing or the mouth breathing is going to exacerbate all sorts of thyroid types of conditions. When someone snores, they breathe through their mouth. This is going to really impact the thyroid and all the organs, and also the artery's diameter, because carbon dioxide is a smooth muscle dilator. And if you're mouth breathing, you're breathing off all your carbon dioxide. So how's your blood vessels going to dilate, meaning open up? For instance, when you sleep, you've got a non-rapid eye movement, like non-REM stage. And during that non-REM stage, the blood vessels open up, you see. They go from 1 to 2 sort of millimeters, more or less, to 3 to 4 millimeters, increasing the flow rate sort of during sleep, which is supposed to be your temperature dropping all the way through your sleep until you wake in the morning. But a greater than 100 meters, 100 centimeters per second, really, a reduced peripheral resistance could be. It's the cause, really, of also anemia and these things, because when you sleep, it's the only moment in time that you're able to break down substance which is not meant to be there. But what happens when your body can't detox? It often then is disrupted from its capacity to be able to provide nutrient to actually absorb new element as well, like iron, for instance, in anemia. And so what to do but to actually assist to help the pancreas have the proper function so that you can absorb more iron. And like the life colloid that we have really has plenty of iron in it. A lot of material is not properly dissolved in the body and blood, and every 15 minutes it's passing through the thyroid, and it can cause neoplasm where substance really isn't being broken down or cleared away. This is similar to what the pancreas is, where stone is always forming more in the pancreas, where people have got dead food, which is high phosphate and high methionine. Otherwise, you've got elevated thyroid-stimulating hormone. It's typical, meaning that something is underactive, like with the thyroid, and needs to actually give it a bit more of a message. And hormones, a hormone that's associated with it is languaging, for instance, and parenting more from a chronic polarization in behaviour, like a don't want, can't, should, try, but must only, never, always, and always not being able to know who's this going to or who's this coming from, because there's a real lack of referential index going on where somebody is, and they're not really in balance. But a balanced person will sort of really get information internal and external, and then also their orientation is more inside and outside, more 50-50 as well, versus being stuck on the outside rather than being able to get inside, and rather than having positive things to be focused on, which you should, because what's the benefit of things framed diversitely, where high cortisol will always really unchecked is really a condition of limited mind function, restricting the conversion of T4, which is thyroxine, to active forms of thyroxine T3. And so Cushing's syndrome, which is drying out of all things, is really an example of cystic fibrosis. And it's really low sodium in the blood because it's all being excreted. And it's really, you could see stones in the thyroid, and the very, very high stress But if you manage the stress, you can really help heal up thyroid and things like that. But a slow fatty hump could have been formed between the shoulders, and the face starts to look more rounded and stretch marks more purpley. And hypothyroidism really excretes 13 different neurotoxins, which is metabolized where we're not, we're at the condition of pituitary activity too slow, or of an increased condition where cortisol is. It can exhaust the adrenal glands and cause overall adrenal burnout, for instance. So polarization of metal responding, meaning sorting for the opposite doesn't fit and what's obscure, for instance, or not being able to exit, produces high levels of adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is stress, and then that impacts the pineal gland, causing it to more solidify with calcium and be cemented. But by 3 p.m., body in the afternoon can have been ready to crash or to relax, because it's typical that bile is flowing, and that's a moment it would have to assist to help with eating and consuming things naturally. But the heat resistance of the imbalance and a palpation going on where you can sense anxiety and muscle weakness and excessive sort of stress response, having been more hardwired. So it always is just natural, rather than somebody being congruent in their processing. They always are sorting with a don't want, can't should, type up, must only. And this really impacts the thyroid and the kidneys and the pancreas, like we're saying. And cortisol dehydrates by robbing sodium from the body, and it gets excreted, like we're talking about, and robs magnesium also. And so the body really isn't able to detox, and 250 milligrams to 600 milligrams of digest aid, for instance, small amount of wild thyme, EGT, or reduced levels of other herbs, and also use of lemon bicarb shot, which you could learn about, is really better support and things which can be for the pancreas to help heal up cystic fibrosis and getting rid of the root cause of it. But it's a disorder of autism, and cystic fibrosis is behind a lot of this, where somebody is excessive saliva or not enough, and the lesions of the brunner glands are there present often, and the pancreas also, where a thickening of mucus won't let the proper reabsorption be, and like the lining of the uterus, for instance, in endometriosis, it's supposed to be reabsorbed, but when it's not, it can wreak havoc more on the body. But the pelvic area, for instance, for her, is supposed to be a pH of 3.9 exact, and what happens when that's not, because the colon is so not in the proper pH at all. So it's a usual thing which microbes from the mouth and from the vagina find their way more into the newborn, and so to show this, and it makes sense, of course. Tissue really can be so not able to be nourished, as I said, because fluids could be thickened, and what to do to thin them. This is what life hydrate is, and life food as well, as you could learn more about this. And then learn how to monophasic diet, where we're more monophasic, and learn more or less to eat once a day overall. Tissue thickens otherwise, and then the pancreas does also, and the uterus and prostate all sort of somewhat can hemorrhage, an excessive nutrient, or ends up getting broken down and coming to be more estrogenic, as it's typical, and it's because of estrogen sort of dependent types of conditions of insulin not being able to be sensitized to produce and absorb excessive amounts of hydrogen from the blood, and blood under the state of cortisol really is a fibrocystic type of condition ongoing, and iron deficiency is really a lack of sodium regulation, and so you've got to really bring that sun-dried ocean wind evaporated salt in, and learn about jubb's cell rejuvenation, which I think is really pretty amazing. And high cortisol that we've been talking about really in this program today with each other is a stress city type of thing. And cortisol really in high doses causes no osmolytic element really much to be acted upon by the pancreas. So it's indigested, and protein is also very high in calcium, not kept out of the cell, causes excitotoxic types of conditions. And the thyroid, because it's the second most vascular organ in the body and it receives all of the blood every 15 minutes, it really, you and I, we have to be able to speak, but when we can't, it sort of really impacts and causes stress more on the thyroid. Yeah. So I think cortisol begets cortisol. Self-love really is you and I being more aware, and narcissism is self-love, and the self-love disorder is narcissistic disorder. But self-love is good, narcissism is good. The only problem is where somebody is loving himself overboard, something isn't right, nothing is in balance, and that's a narcissistic disorder. But self-love to wit really is, for the record, you could hear, is really important. Just everything that's aggressed in emotion has intelligence. It's just not intelligent to be stuck in any one of those things. But we shouldn't really be, we should be open to where somebody's boundaries are and know where those things are, rather than rejecting other people's boundaries, where these people often do, and push those boundaries. They're not caring too much to switch, stop switching things on or off, but they should, because polarization is just like switching things on or off, and yo-yoing back and forward as a behaviour really is poor. It should be corrected, but not have a proper transform personally, and having been presented more with an intelligence of ordinariness. Who's to know how important cortisol being low is, and all sorts of behaviours that are cortisol dependent is a focus always on harm and injury, cost and damage, and it's away from as a direction rather than toward and inside. It's outside continuously, and adrenochrome get built up, and you could really hear how someone really doesn't care, so care is really your body, and that's and we're supposed to care. We need to just focus on what care is and let everything else go, because that's just completely the best thing to do. You've got a potassium sodium pump which should work proper, and if you're learning how to do some lemon bicarb shots after you consume food and things just like this, and you only eat once a day more or less, and you're learning about what's osmolytic, for instance, our formulas are very rife with bringing nutrient in which is more osmolytic fully of it all. And so this cystic fibrosis transfer regulating protein, which we have been talking a bit about in our program, that's supposed to really cause pancreas and brunner gland function, doesn't, because sodium can be excreted where substance is there, and mucus and mucin thickening of the fluids. And so that's the idea behind life hydrate and rhodium, osmium and ruthenium, which most can't put into their product because that's just too expensive to work with. But it just gives you a glow around your cells. And life quality transmutation really is potassium more into sodium via adding magneton or subtracting, and you're getting a turgor, which is a pressure, and it's supposed to be a tensor wave of floating. And in a JC quantity, you've got a sodium potassium pump, which is really necessary for generating energy. And so everybody should keep in mind that the cell is really a mass conglomerate of individualized organelle, all as life quality living in symbiotic relationship in a mutual lived assistance inside, and must depend upon the life quality terrain. And so the life quality really isn't anything, but the terrain is everything. And I guess if that's a message for today, it's a good one, because cortisol really impacts things quite considerably. And orthophilic, meaning straight with nature, sodium chloride really is what heals the body. Otherwise, you've really got this material that's not made and missing, and so transfer doesn't happen for sodium getting excreted more. And So chloride levels really should be 60 millimole per litre or higher, and could be down as low as 30 millilitres per litre. And so it's indicated that cystic fibrosis is really a condition because you've got sticky mucus, your phlegm is sticky, sodium chloride really being released not proper, being delivered like it should. Otherwise, then it really is exhaustiveness for the body. But that could all be healed up if parents and those who could become more aware how to heal up cystic fibrosis, because it's really underneath most many diseases. So hypercapnia radically alters things, causing high calcium levels, also raising levels of substance which blocks and stops proper pulmonary endothelial cell function. Keep in mind, of course, you really need orthophilic sodium chloride, and getting it from rocks is not going to really help too much. Or hyperosmolytics is what sodium causes you to be able to do, so that really leads to a greater increased capacity to bring nitrous oxide, which opens up your red blood corpuscles, your vessels, and carbon dioxide, which opens up your vessels. And so, sodium chloride really increases hyperosmolarity to increase blood flow through the intestine, yet not if constantly robbed by adverse sort of limited mind function like we're talking about, unchecked. And who's saying quiet the mind, gut the mind, and mind the gut? It's really an intestinal vascular nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide, which really smooth muscle dilator, like we're talking about, which opens and relaxes the blood vessels. So it really assisting to keep flow happening. So the basics of our message today, epigenetics really could have knocked genes out. Jubb's product, of course, is assist cause the replenishment and conditioning of DNA as it's supposed to be. Salt not kept causes sticky fluids. Part of the reason why I produce life hydrate and compound and such, and puts these products together more, where a program really is existing that can help correct the DNA and correct that mutation and correct and put conditioning and clear up cystic fibrosis itself, and be really understanding that it's this transmembrane regulator gene which is compromised the body, and then epigenetic factors of eating and lifestyle, and not knowing what live food is, and not knowing that we are more calorie restricted and going to live a longer life. But a loss of proper function of this cystic fibrosis transfer regulation protein that we've been talking about doesn't let sodium remain more in the body, causing it to be excreted, causing it to be lost, causing it to be reduced, causing anemia, causing all sorts of conditions, and causing smooth muscle around blood vessels like the kidneys and other things not to necessarily be opened up, which really can be opened up with bicarbonate and having more north negative element like lithium and fluorine, incredible, of course, which is found in our product. You've got typically a lack of N-acetylneuramidic acid, which is our own body surfactant, and it's been taken over by N-glyconeuramidic acid from animals and things. And then in our product, you've got a correlation correction going on where ubiquitin molecules are, which help regulate the usefulness of the C-AMP process, where activation of a chloride is existing, and bicarbonate channels, which is what our program does, assisting to help. This is what the bicarb shots do and things, normalising the life quality terrain so magnetron can be exchanged more, where the water environment is, where epithelial cells are cells lining a passageway, they're sort of semi-permeable, you see. It's the creatine and all these hormones come to be proper. Otherwise, brunner gland and Harderian gland, which brunner gland, of course, is in your small intestine, Harderian glands around your eyes, can all not function, and you can have big dark circles, a lot like a raccoon or something around the eyes. But a mutation of the non-normal functional cystic fibrotic transfer regulated protein, like we're talking about, can have not be present, and then where somebody's lifestyle isn't supportive of live food, and only monophasic, meaning eating once a day, it's for sure that you have to absolutely do some subcell rejuvenation and clear away all that extraneous mucus and thin the flow of fluids, and so your epithelial, meaning cells that cover your linings, the internal of yourself, can have a proper sensitization and proper have permeability of the membrane that's really lining all these. So sodium chloride, like we're talking about, is so very important, and they travel together. And if it's been excreted like it is, where you can see sticky mucus and things like that, it really is the cause of a coagulatedness of all body secretion relative, including pancreas. And so are you going to get nutrient to your cells? No. You see, you have to really look into this. And this is something which I've worked with a lot, like working with people who have in a cachectic state and what to do to help turn things around like that, to give people a longer life. Yeah. Anyway, it's in a nutshell. I guess, you got your mind, your gut, you've got micronutrient, you've got osmolytic element, you've got proper pancreas function, and that's the reason for Digest Aid and Life Hydrate, the black cabbage truffle, which people could learn a little more about those things and what the reason is behind them. But you're really learning actually how to live a better life. And if you got your mind and mind your gut, that's the way to go. But otherwise, you'll see behaviours all sort of where somebody's feeding you, that person will bite the hand that's feeding them. You see behaviours that's really typical of phlegminess, and it's really a tinderbox of things of polarisation, often behaviour-wise, and meta-responding not being able to exit, and infection and the cause of a thickened mucus, or typically we could see yellow skin and environmentally sort of like a lacking of luster. And saliva typically is similarly not properly dispersible where the water is. There's evidence of cystic fibrosis there going on. Thick mucus acts as a barrier to defend against non-ecological particle, but what happens when that's just going on all the time, and how's that going to affect your fluid flow? Obviously, it really is a disaster. And how come these things aren't really being talked about like they should? It's a properly kept life collar terrain, which really gives you and ensures you've got really gut-mind-gut connection proper. And it's the submucosal sort of glands where you are, where airways are that produce mucin and also mucus. You've got cilia, which all sort of got their little uniform sort of sweepy pulse and things. How nice. And getting rid of all toxin and stuff and clearing things up. But what happens if that doesn't work? You see, fluid is too sticky. You see, you've got south positive along with north negative element, and a nutrient assists clear fibrocystic conditions up. 4R assists to help digest. And all these things clears up behaviour, really, and otherwise you've got a little bit of a hand going on, biting the hand that feeds, and 4R really is wonderful because it acts as a expectorant to clear things up like this. So where somebody lies down, of course, and they're in repose more, they're going to actually build more carbon and actually get more oxygen exchange because they'll actually really quiet their breath down more. And also stop all the internal dialogue, because 80,000 words a day where most people are, it's just like rabbit breath, breathing way too fast. And anxiety can have been present and things like that. And it's how about whole brain functioning? Look into it. It's important because it's really the cause of the condition to be more whole and flowing versus cystic fibrotic types of state eventually. And applying Life Hydrate and also in the water, assisting to reduce anxiety by clearing away or by having a structure more and having proper body surfactant. It's excessive mucus is behind most of these diseases, and all sorts of drainedness not having occurred like it should, and strong product which helps clear away those sorts of things and giving you a bit of a longer life. Anyway, I think that's pretty good, Lukey.
Oh, God, so amazing, Dr. Jubb. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Is it similar to fatty liver disease?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it's really, why do you get a fatty liver? You get a fatty liver because you can't break fats down. Why can't you break fats down? Well, fats are being consumed which don't have any enzyme, and the pancreas should supply lipase, but if it's not working properly, how's those fats going to be broken down? It's a global fat challenge, typical, that most people have.
It makes sense. Okay, so Mary from Cornwall, she says, "Thank you, David. You are so highly thought of. I pray for your well-being and elevation to your proper recognition for your life, heart, and dedication to people."
Thanks, Mary. Yes, that's lovely. I think to Mary and everyone, our sisters, I care so much about greatly, because, when women come together, our sisters, you really have a revolution. But not before that, in fact, because, it's really the women, once they get hold of something, it's sacrilegious to have frozen logos. It really is. Our sisters are the ones who could see what's positive, what's adverse. Of course, mothers can too, but it's like the emotion of the sisters are just not going to stand for what's sacrilegious fully. No, you see. Many suffer, of course, and not anybody's really being taught proper how the ovulation cycle really, for our sisters, is not dependent on menstruation. And things just like this is so important, but that's a mucus discharge at the end of the cycle is a clear mucus discharge, and a mature egg really, if it was attracted and came down picked up by the fibrae, which are little ferns that sit above the ovaries, and one of those eggs that's ripened, let's say, is picked up, but perhaps it's not. Now it's on a journey for between 12 and 24 hours in the fallopian tube, with little cilia that help sweep it down. And it's only just during that period of time that the sperm could have been fertilized. Otherwise, then fertilization doesn't occur. But if fertilization occurs, it's going to go down, and it deposits itself in the endometrium of the uterus. And the ovulation surge, for instance, around the 12th to 14th day, you've got a luteinizing hormone, and via pituitary types of the maturing of the egg, for instance. And it's only where the fibrae and the fallopian tube can have picked the egg up that's fertilized, that would get fertilized if it was. Otherwise, it gets deposited in the endometrium. And it then blood builds up, and then as progesterone no longer is existed as much, or is estrogen, because the pregnancy doesn't exist, then a clear mucus discharging, and then all the red blood corpuscle is reabsorbed. But not if conditions exist of debris there, like toast, spaghetti, all kinds of stuff there. It's going to be just hemorrhaged instead. So it's really on the side of where crampedness could be more typical. It is that's the ovary that's releasing, and temperature rises during the time of that, and also increased libido does. And mucus is slippery, more spin bark, and the breasts enlarge slightly. Of course, your sense of olfaction comes to be really, really more heightened. And about the 28th day, if the egg wasn't fertilized, it's really going to be just where the red blood corpuscle is in the endometrium, all reabsorbed more back into blood itself. And you're just only having a clear mucus discharge at the end of the cycle versus losing a lot of line because of hemorrhaging. The egg really is surrounded by the corpus luteum, which is a yellow little casing, and continues to produce progesterone for a moment of time. And if it were pregnancy has existed, it continues to produce progesterone. Otherwise, it slowly reduces, and then that's the end of the cycle more. The pituitary stimulates ovulation, of course, via the follicle-stimulating hormone, and where an egg really is produced, of course, you've got progesterone coming out of the corpus luteum, which was the casing around where the egg was. And as I said, if it wasn't fertilized, then that slowly diminishes and the egg casing no longer producing progesterone, all of that drops, and so the blood buildup then becomes reabsorbed by aggregation, fusion, differentiation back into healthy blood, and then there's just a clear mucous discharge at the end of the cycle. And so our sisters can remain fertile for a long, long time, studies show that that's the case. But anyway, I'd be glad for us to do a show a bit more. Like, obviously, people have been talking about how do you know how old the Earth is, and is it right, like all these dates and stuff? What do you have to say about this in the formation of the Earth and this sort of thing? And that's something very interesting in our work. And maybe we should do a show about this, Lukey, at some point. Maybe next show we do a show a bit about this, mate. Eh?
Oh, that'd be great.
Anything else, mate?
So, Lucas from Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. He says, can you inquire to Happy Face about the sacred secretion?
Oh, yes. You when you have ghrelin, you're slightly hungry. And when you're slightly hungry, this is an incredible feeling because human growth hormone is being released during this period of time. That you could slide a nectar that comes up from you within, and you're swallowing some of this. You've got saliva being produced in your mouth. You've got endogenous and enkephalin and beta-endorphin types of opiates which are released. And these are truly incredible because it produces energy of itself and gives you a capacity to be integrated where your body is, where flow is more versus parts not integrated. Oxytocin is released, which causes you to feel more connected to everyone. But if your speech and language is more about being connected, oxytocin is going to be as well. A natural condition is to seek agreement, and you don't have conflict. And where conflict is existing, you've got an aberration. You've got a condition of a process broken, and the process should be put back so it fixes things. At the moment, we've got a process on the Earth which is broken big time and must be fixed because we've got tragedies going on and everybody's intelligent looking by and seeing everybody being genocided in many places. And what would be the reason why everybody would just be, of course, not knowledgeable that our rights have been removed? So wake up. It's you and I more, and what can we do ourselves? And this is the greatest enemy, not anything out there. Who's talking about you and I and what we can do and what we should do, which is these ministry councils, for instance, and things. But sipping a nectar comes from achieving things. And a bliss happens. It's not being blissful, but bliss. And this naturally comes from nothing, that you are focused more on the positive good just naturally. If your nature is, you've got out of your own way and you're lifting your hands, I'm lifting my hands in your name for sure. Ha, yes, I am. And how about being able to just have left your ways behind, because who's serving most really has done such. They've left their ways behind, and we're living what we speak and speaking what we live, and every single word we use just has a physiology. And if you're not seeking agreement, that's wrong. We should be. And keeping a prolonged conversation about stuff and you're not even having mentioned agreement shows a brain set which isn't really normal. the news and all sorts of things doesn't follow a proper logarithm showing you that it's not coming out of anything normal, matter of fact, because otherwise it would have a proper logarithm, which it doesn't, you see. So you can see synthetic, artificial, redacted types of conditions where people cannot say no, but an endogenous opiates, beta endorphins, enkephalins, and these things are really naturally sipped. And when you lengthen the inspiration through your nose, and you've focused your consciousness like more on the inspirative aspect of the breath versus like a breath out, you're in more a creative moment where, and a creative state of being versus just a state of mind. It's really not a state of mind. It really is a way of being more. Yes. So this comes from nothing, and everyone should learn how to be nobody rather than being somebody. And everybody's trying to be a body, and it's like, mate, that's wrong. How about just clearing that away? Learn how to be really good at being nobody. And so now you're going to be more spiritual, you'll be more eye-aware, versus everything is linked to how does your knee feel, or how all sorts of things of your body function itself. It's moving toward the things which is more civic-minded and being civic in care. And the world really needs this right now, very much. And as we participate in this, this is the nectar, so beautiful, that's sipped, and nothing that passes your lips is equivalent to it, and nothing that could satiate you or quench could do such more than this, which is about being joined more with good idea. And this is really something which feeds you incredible. Yes, it does. And so you don't have to eat as much.
Wow. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, love you, Lukey. Well, when we do another show, I would love for us to talk about, the age of the Earth. I think it's a really good one. We should think some great surprising talk that we've got coming up, mate. Yeah.